All right, Ford, what the heck are you doing? 99.9% of all nuts and bolts are standard US. Shock absorber is freaking metric. Very top nut is 15. The inside top, 18 mil. Bottom, 18 and 18. It's like, what the heck? You start a trend and then you change it. All right, notes on this shock absorber. The top grommet that came out is one piece. What comes with the new shock is two piece. So obviously you put one on the top and then you'll slide this through here and that'll go on the bottom. Hopefully. I've not tested this one yet, but it may not actually be the right design now that I'm looking at it. What did I do with the broken? There it is. Here's a broken piece. So this is how it came off, like this. So to line this up, yeah, it is approximately the same size, but this bottom one has a plate. I don't know. Let me put it together and we'll see what happens. All right, so it's a little bit different mounting design. The bottom is still quite simple, just a straightforward bolt through it. The top will have the plate, the grommet, then grommet and plate. As soon as I find it, I dropped it, and then the nut that goes on top. The one that came off had a single grommet and it had a built-in plate on the bottom. I assume it's built in. Doesn't not look like it's going to detach. No, it doesn't. And this shock is completely seized up. It's been dead for a while. So I'll get this one done. Then when I get the transmission line done and get this area completed, the fender liner and so forth back in, then I'll pull the fender liner and tire on the other side and take care of that shock. All right, the new shock is in. Wasn't too terrible. Like I said, 18 millimeter on the bottom, front, back. Top is 15. And we're gonna have fun if we ever have to remove this, because that area is just way too thin to get a wrench on it. Installing it, the threads were clean, the nut was clean, so I was able just to hold on to the top portion while I tightened the nut down. And I went almost all the way completely down. It became firm. I didn't have to do a massive torque on it. But I'm going to dread taking this off, or I'm going to pity the poor fool who has to do it besides me. Most likely they'll just cut it off. There's nothing else to be done unless there's some very, very, very thin wrenches that could possibly go on there. Otherwise, it's looking good. Okay, I'm starting to work on the driver's side shock absorber, and hopefully you can see, but it's definitely in the rubber bushing is definitely in worse shape. It's got a lot more rust. The case is splitting, and down here the grommet is also, or not grommet, but the bushing is also heavily deteriorated. So this side is even worse than the other one, and I'm sure it's probably not working as well. So we'll be getting this puppy off in a second. And for anyone that's interested, do not expect this top stud of the shock absorber to stay intact when you're trying to take the back off the nut. Here's the nut. I'm sorry, that's not it. This one is. It's got a larger flange there to fit over the bushing. Anyway, just don't expect it to stay intact. It will break. Both of them broke, left and right. No matter how much cleanup I did and how much penetrating oil I used prior to, I mean, this time I went a little bit above and beyond trying to keep it intact just to make it easier to pull it off, so I wouldn't have to then mess with removing the broken part from inside the nut. But nope, no go. So at this point, you get everything disconnected, and it's just a matter of popping it out. I don't know if I can do it one-handed here or not. I gotta put this thing down so I can get both hands in there. I'll be back. Okay, here's the old and the new, and we got some differences just to touch on it again in case you're curious. You're going from a one-piece bushing that was inserted into this hole on the top, and on the new you're going with two-piece. And of course you'll see there's a little groove here. Well, that groove of course goes in a position so it goes into the hole, and then when you do that you're going to cup it with the plastic on the bottom, you know, kind of common sense it through. And then the top one goes in the same way, except you'll cup it with the metal piece on top. And this is the nut that comes with it, and they call it good. Well, I'm not happy, so I feel more comfortable using the original. It's lasted this long, the threads are good, so instead of using that, I'm going to go like that on top. It just, I don't know, it just seems better. Just one nut of an unknown hardness. I'll pass. And it's real simple. You just compress it with your hands, put the bottom in, put the stud through, insert the top up through the hole, make sure it doesn't snag anywhere, damage your threads. Oh, before you do that, I'm sorry, put this on in that manner before you put this up through the hole. So that will be in place. You won't have to mess with it later. And then it's just a matter of putting this down on the top, cranking it down. And how far do you crank it down? Well, I just try to match it up with what I took off. Of course, this one is broken off, but I remember how many threads, and it was down about halfway showing. So that'll be good. Okay, back to the topic of how far do you tighten up the nut. All I can tell you is how I do it. I tighten up the nut until the bushing is compressed. Not so much that it's gone completely flat, because you've completely overdone it at that point, but probably about half of its original width. I compress it down to that point. I mean, you want it tight, so as you travel down the road, you're not going to want this to be loose within that area, because that's just going to cause extreme wear and probably break the stud off earlier, or damage the bushings, and it's just going to get worse. So, you know, make it pretty tight. And of course, after you drive it for a period of time, I don't know, 25, 30, 50 miles, whatever, stop and check, make sure everything is still the way that you want it to be. All right, we got it all together. Got the bottom in, got the top in, tighten down. Next step for me is to position the vacuum reservoir and associated, I think it's EPA canister, back onto the inner fender liner and get those bolted down. And I think at that point I'll be complete with the engine compartment. All my previously installed fittings. Oh, by the way, I did double clamp the fittings that went onto my homemade flared ends. So I double clamped those puppies. The ends that I cut off the originals, they had a good bubble flare on the end. I was able to get those taken care of, but on these new ones, the steel was extremely hard and wouldn't flare to the amount that I felt comfortable with. So I double clamped those ends. But anyway, I'll get that tightened up on the inner fender well. And like I said, we'll be done with the engine compartment. And this is just probably an anal thing that I do, but I found that it helps. Whenever I take a piece off that I'm going to replace with an aftermarket, I always make note of the original Ford number. I've got just a little notepad cheat sheet on my computer. So if I ever need to cross-reference, say that the ones I put on here are not good, or I want to replace them at some point in the future. And it says it's a Motorcraft number, then the Ford number. So I'll write this one down, type it in my computer, keep it for future reference. And of course, if someone else ever asks the question on a forum or whatever, I'll have the information, help them out. Okay, well, we got I don't know, some type of crankcase ventilation canister, EPA something coming off the PCV valve, looks like. And of course the vacuum reservoir reattached to the inner fender liner. I really do think I'm done with the engine compartment for the moment. So we'll have to check the radiator fluid at some point here in the future. But got everything connected as best we can. So now I'm going to lower the front end, get the vehicle on an even keel, and finish topping off that differential that I didn't finish.